A recent wave of xenophobic attacks in South Africa has sparked reprisals across the continent. I'm Femi Oke.
And I'm Malika Bilal. Today we discuss what's fueling those attacks and what's being done to stop them.
To join the conversation, you know what to do. You can tweet us at AJ Stream or leave a comment in our live YouTube chat.
And you too can be in the stream.
My name is Letlokhonolo Mokgwarane, lawyer, social justice and gender activist, and you are in the stream.
Xenophobia-fueled attacks in South Africa have killed at least 12 people.
The latest incident happened on Sunday in Johannesburg, leaving one person dead and 5 wounded. Most of the violence, which began in late August, takes place in Pretoria and Johannesburg, where large immigrant populations live. News of the attacks has prompted reprisals in Zambia, Nigeria, and the Democratic Republic of the Congo, as protesters targeted South African-owned businesses and diplomatic offices.
Joining us to discuss this in Victoria Falls, Zimbabwe, Lindiwe Zulu. She's the ANC chairperson for the International Relations Committee. In Johannesburg, South Africa, Maletwe Sibe, he is the founder of the People's Coalition Against Xenophobia. And in Enugu, Nigeria, journalist Chika Odua. It is good to have you, everybody. I wish it was over a better circumstance. But Lindiwe, let me show you a couple of headlines. I'm sure you've been reading them yourself. I'm just curious about your reaction. Here we have from African News, Xenophobia Hub. Mozambique blasts South Africa to repatriate citizens. Another headline here, 640 Nigerians signed up to take free flights home from South Africa after xenophobic attacks on foreigners. It's that word xenophobia, xenophobic. Do you associate that with South Africa, that word, that attitude?
Well, it's very unfortunate that we have to associate South Africa with the images that you're showing there. It's not something that we're very proud of as a nation and as a country. It is something that we believe as South Africa we need to do everything in our power to deal with it, but in a number of ways. We've got to deal with it from a legal point of view. We've got to deal with it from engaging communities. We've got to deal with it from engaging even the countries that who are now making the statements that they are making right now. And I'm very happy that we have Mami Chloe here, who is from the Coalition Against Xenophobia. Those are the kind of people that we need right now as a country to have a conversation, but we need to take our conversation back to what is the root cause of all this. And I don't think that it is something that we can be able to do on our own as a country. But however, as a country and as South Africa, especially government, we need to take responsibility where responsibility lies with us.
I think our community would be very happy to hear you say that, especially because there are members of that community who don't believe this is xenophobia. So I want to share with you a few tweets from people. This is Farouk, who says, it's not xenophobia, it's just criminal acts using xenophobia as an excuse. Another person, Emma, says acts of criminality ain't xenophobia, and repeats that a few more times. And Ibrahim here sums this up saying, how can we stop xenophobic attacks when the leaders of South Africa don't agree in the first place that it is xenophobia? And so people are hearing mixed messages there. Sibe, I'll give this one to you. What is your take on what people seem to be saying?
Well, I mean, it is clearly xenophobic. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a systematic, targeting of migrants who have been the main victims of the rampant looting and acts of violence that have been perpetrated in the past few weeks.
I want to bring in Chika here. Chika, I was reading your Twitter feed the other week and I read this, my first experience with xenophobia in South Africa. And then you tell a story that got so many likes and people really empathized with your story. And your conclusion from your story is quite damning for South Africans. Tell us the story first of all.
Well, basically, I had gone to South Africa in October 2016 to attend 2 journalism events. One was a CNN African Journalist Award, and one was a conference to engage civic data journalists. And at the international airport in Cape Town, I was approached by a very hostile man who claimed to have been an official at the airport. He was not wearing a uniform, therefore I was very wary of him. And he approached me right after I had gone through immigration. And just right off the bat, his entire demeanor was belligerent, it was hostile, it was suspicion, and it was just very alarming. It threw me off guard, and he was just demanding to know, what are you doing here? What are you doing here? What are you doing here? And I told him several times that I'm here as a journalist to attend a media event, and he was very skeptical and had a lot of doubt on his face. And it was just very uncomfortable. I had people in the airport watching me. He wouldn't let me move. Anytime I tried to go to baggage claim or go to the restroom, he would physically stand in front of my person, just blocking my movement. So it went on about 45 minutes until another airport official finally came to rescue me.
All right, so Chika, we've all had bad experiences at the airport. How do you know he just wasn't grumpy? Why are you saying he was xenophobic?
Right. Well, I kept saying that I was a journalist and he wanted to see my passport. I showed him my passport, which was a Nigerian passport. And that's when I saw a lot of he just didn't like the fact that I was traveling with a Nigerian passport. I saw it on his face. And it's like, oh, you're Nigerian. And just from there, the questions that he was asking me again, why are you here? And I think me traveling as a female by myself with a Nigerian passport, he didn't like it. And this was also expressed by the airport official who did actually come to rescue me.
So this was a bad experience for you, a poor experience of South Africa. But why would you then go on to say that South Africans are xenophobic from that experience?
Because I've heard so many other similar experiences, Femi. I mean, this is a reoccurring issue. You know, this is not new. This is not happening out of the blue or out of a sudden. And I've spoken to so many other African nationals, and they express similar experiences at the airports, where if you, for example, your physical features don't appear to be South African, your people come after you. Also, a taxi driver told me that if I were Nigerian, he would have robbed me. He didn't know I was Nigerian because, you know, I don't speak with a Nigerian accent. So you hear statements like this, and you hear this over and over again. And of course, you just come to understand that we don't always feel welcomed. As African nationals, we don't always feel welcome coming into South Africa.
A very outspoken politician, Julius Malema, had something to say about these recent attacks, and he framed them somewhat differently. Have a listen.
I said the other time, bring all the buses, let's put all these Nigerians and Zimbabweans in buses, let's take them back, and let's see if you'll get an employment tomorrow. Yeah. It's a myth. It's the most stupid thing to think of. You are justifying crime, and you give it nice names called xenophobia, Afrophobia. It's crime. It must be dealt with as such.
Sibe, what Julius Malema said there, it resonated with lots of people around the continent and the world as well. Is that your take on how South Africans are behaving right now?
Look, I think the attitude of government...
Some
also,
South Africans, I should say.
Yeah, but I think also, you know, the EFF to deny that it is migrants who are systematically targeted, and hence, you know, you can't characterize it anyhow but as xenophobic. Things that by denying that, you know, will make the problem disappear. And I think the point that I think is correct in the point, you know, in the argument of Malema is precisely what we're making, that the crisis of xenophobia is, you know, located in the deepening crisis in the economy, where we've been losing millions of jobs, particularly since the economic crisis of 2008-2009. Over 2 million jobs were lost in that crisis. The situation hasn't gotten better. If anything, it has gotten worse. Today, unemployment is sitting at over 10 million. That is about, over about 40%, I think, according to some estimations. And I mean, the levels of poverty, over 50% or approximately 50% of the population in this country are living in poverty. And amongst Black African, that is, you know, much more worse, at the region of about 64 or more %. Now, it is this deepening levels of poverty that is at the root cause of this crisis. By every measure and social indication, the crisis of the working class and the poor is deepening, and there is no solution on the basis of the existing macroeconomic policies of this government. None of the politicians that have been voicing their concerns over this have offered any viable solution, and we think it is only by breaking with the neoliberal austerity policies of this capitalist government that we can begin to make an inroads in solving the fundamental problems of unemployment, of housing, of lack of access to education, collapsing public services, and all of these problems that have made this country a lake of fuel for discontent and, of course, explosive events that we have seen in the past weeks.
Sibe, I'm glad you mentioned poverty levels and unemployment, because I'm seeing that online as well. So this is Julius on Twitter, who says, apartheid created inequality. South African leaders failed to address inequality in post-apartheid South Africa, and instead some told people that the problem is having foreigners in the country. The result is xenophobia. I want to go on to this point, picking up on that. This is Diwa, a director at Human Rights Watch, who says, it's absolutely frightening, and it's reared its ugly head again in Johannesburg. I spoke about it on the radio, and a very hostile caller threatened me. Scary, and very little action from the police. Now, this is Diwa, who sent us a video comment elaborating on his thoughts on what it's been like. Have a listen.
The police are not doing their job in South Africa. This is something that can be brought under control. The killings, the looting of properties, primarily of African foreign nationals, can be stopped if there is serious policing in South Africa. Also, political leaders in South Africa have made reckless statements to incite xenophobia with no accountability. There is need for the leaders in South Africa to acknowledge that what is happening is not just criminality, it is xenophobic, and they must then implement the existing national action plan to combat xenophobia and other forms of intolerances.
Lindiwe, I'll give this one to you. I see you writing notes there, thinking of things to respond to. And of course, a lot of people have this question, so you're the best person to talk about it with. But he says that politicians, police aren't doing enough, and in fact, they're stoking the fires.
Well, I think the police, well, let me start with the political leaders. Let's start with the president himself. And I think that everyone has heard him saying it, calling it exactly that it is xenophobia. We've had other leaders, including the Minister of Police and others. What I think we need to do is not to be boxed into one level of appreciating and understanding the challenges that we have. When we talk about economic challenges, that is fact. When we talk about an economy that's not doing very well, that is fact. When we talk about people looking for jobs, when you talk about unemployment, when you talk about inequality, those are all facts. But fact, on the other hand, is that government is doing everything that it can under the circumstances to make sure that we implement our plan. And we know we have the National Development Plan that keeps on being updated and changing in order for it to adapt to the current situation. The bottom line is that as long as you are in a situation where there is a nation that is going through a very difficult situation, which is compounded by the past, which pocketed us into little groupings. By the way, that system even made people think that black South Africans were better than black Africans in general. We belong to the African continent. That is why from the very beginning when I spoke, I said, this isn't just a South African problem. It is a problem for all of us as leaders of the African continent, as communities, as individuals. First and foremost, all the African countries. We need to grow our economies. We need to build democracy. We need to appreciate that we've got to take care of our citizens, but our citizens also need to take care of themselves. Earlier on, when I was having the conversation, I said, I was a refugee myself. I know what it is to wake up in the morning and pack your bags and go to a country you don't know. We mustn't allow a situation where people have to do that because they are forced by circumstances in their own countries. But once they are in our country, in South Africa, we need to take responsibility. We've got to make sure that there's law and order. We've got to make sure that people are properly documented. We've got to make sure that people are legal here. We've got to make sure that people are not engaging in things which are illegal, both for foreign nationals as well as South Africans. So it's a long journey that we have to travel. It's 25 years of democracy. And by the way, immediately after 1994, we had our borders almost completely open, a lot of people coming in, and we were not even thinking that later on in the years we're going to be confronted with something like this. So it simply means let us strengthen our institutions of democracy. Let's respect human rights also at the same time, because there are people in South Africa who are legal, who are not doing anything illegal. But on the other hand, there are people in South Africa who are illegal and doing illegal things. And the issue of the crime, yes, it is a fact. Why is it that people would go to burn before they burn it down? So I'm saying it's not as easy as we might take. It's a complicated situation. And I'm here in Zimbabwe, by the way. That's one of the issues that's being discussed here. We have had to engage with the leaders here because we've got Mozambique, Angola, Namibia, all those countries that are here.
Lindewe, let me just ask you, being in Zimbabwe right now, some of the, let me just say, the vernacular for Zimbabweans in South Africa is not very complimentary, and also the vernacular for Nigerians. I don't even know that vernacular. I don't know that in South Africa is not very complimentary. I was wondering how people were responding to you. Chika, can you explain what the vernacular is, how Nigerians are sometimes referred to and Zimbabweans are sometimes referred to in South Africa?
From what I understand, the word is makwere kwere. And I've heard different explanations as to what that actually means. I think it's supposed to be, from one explanation, kind of a way to make fun of the way languages in that part of the world sound, especially languages in Zimbabwe. So it's supposed to make fun of the way it sounds. Other words, I mean, you kind of see xenophobia in pop culture in South Africa, I have to say. For example, the 2009 movie.
I really don't think we should go. I don't think we should go that route, because listen, as I'm saying, I've been a refugee in my life, and I was called many names. In Tanzania, there was a name for us. In Angola, there was a name for us. In Mozambique, there was a name for us. So all I'm saying, as the government of South Africa, we do not want to add fuel to the fire. Like I'm saying here, we've got people that we have to explain
I hear you. I'm just curious as to your reception in Zimbabwe, knowing that you're a high-profile South African. Have you noticed that your reputation has your reputation been tarnished by the last couple of weeks of activity?
I'm not alone. Yeah, I'm not alone here. The Secretary General is here. All the Secretaries General of the countries are also here. We're having a meeting here. The good thing is I am in the midst of Africans who are saying to us, South Africa, we're not happy with what we're seeing. Please do something about it. Make sure that there's policing. Make sure that you have the intelligence. Make sure you have the other things. They're not chasing us around. They're saying to us here, we're not happy with what has happened. Can we find a solution to the problem?
The role that xenophobia is playing. I think that there is an attempt to deny the role xenophobia is playing. You know, we've heard the police minister say last week that this is criminality, this is a breach in law and order. When President Ramaphosa came to Nigeria just recently, he also said the same thing, that this is not about xenophobia. This is, again, criminality.
No, I wonder if you've read this
over and over. And also the Minister of International Relations, she said that Nigerians in South Africa are engaged in human trafficking and trafficking. These are broad strokes. These are gross stereotypes that are being used to pay people.
Let's be honest.
You can't really address the issue until you actually call it what it is.
No. Listen, my sister. Let's not use words. Let's not just use words. I said from the very beginning, we have to understand it for what it is. It's not one threat. It is xenophobia. We have said that. The president has said that in no uncertain terms. The statements of government have said that in no uncertain terms. What I disagree with is to begin to narrow a very serious problem. We're not happy with it. I can tell you right now, we are ashamed of this as South Africa, because we are one of those countries that have been in the forefront of supporting peace, democracy in the African continent. We've spent our time going out there and engaging. By the way, the very president, I'm saying, has not been afraid to call it what it is. He has also planned to make sure that he sends out to the African continent.
So, Lindiwe,
people that
I hear
can
what you're
engage
saying there. I want
with
to
the
bring
leaders.
in our community off of the back of what you're saying. This is coming in live on YouTube right now. Ahmed Hassan says, attacking innocent poor immigrants will not solve people's problems. Get rid of corruption and make the government accountable. It is corruption that is eating your economy. Fight corruption, not immigrants. So I know you do, which is why I read it out. And someone else agrees. I want to bring in the opposition because the opposition would agree with that comment in particular as well. So have a listen to a member of the DA.
The ANC government is unable to manage the economy. They're unable to manage the public sector. They've got the totally wrong approach. And so therefore, all that will happen is that we are going to constantly have people who turn on each other because they've got no opportunity. They don't feel like they've got any hope. And we're making a case to say that your entire economic policy is wrong, and therefore it is leading us to this dismal situation which we find ourselves in, and we're ultimately finding ourselves in a more militarized state where there's more brute force, and you're relying on police to resolve ultimately economic problems.
Sibe, we haven't heard your voice in a minute. I want to give this one to you. Economic policy and changing that, is that enough to make it so that we don't see attacks like this happen in future?
I mean, firstly, let's be clear about it. It is precisely the policies that this government has pursued in the past 25 years that has brought us where we are. That even during that period of an economic boom between 2001 and 2008, we actually had a vast social polarization that was predicated on attacks through neoliberal restructuring that has casualized many workers into precarious forms of employment that has reduced wages as a share of the national income. And then when the economic crisis hit, it was on the basis of a country that has reached, a status or notoriety of being the most unequal society in the world, with a Gini coefficient of 0.7. Now, it was on that basis that when millions of jobs have been lost, in addition to the fact that this very elite, this very government that the minister represents,
let me just ask you. Let me just push you to ask you, because we're in the last few minutes of the show, and I don't want you to fall off the edge of our programming here. People's Coalition Against Xenophobia. You are the founder of that. Rather than dwelling on the past, what is possible? What are you able to do? In the back of your shot, can you read what that board says behind you? What's the sign say behind you?
More than less phobia.
Yes.
Yes. I love that.
Yes. All right. How are we going to get more Zen, less xenophobia?
I think for us, what we need is solve the problems of unemployment, of growing poverty, of collapsing public services. And our view is that you need to be able to have a mass public works program that can ensure that we rebuild our schools, our clinics, our hospitals, our public infrastructure. But for that, you require the reindustrialization of the country that has been devastated by the past crisis, by the crisis of the past 10 years, but also the neoliberal policies that have, allowed the multinational cooperation that are raiding our industry through takeovers that have destroyed thousands and tens of thousands of jobs in the past few years and so on.
Yeah.
And for that, we believe you must nationalize the commanding hearts of the economy, the key sectors, the mining, the banks, the factories, under a democratic control and management of the workers to ensure that the economy is planned in the interest of many.
Sibe, the voice of the unionists coming out loud and clear. Chika, the voice of the journalists. Too late because we're wrapping up and she appreciates our wrap. And Lindiwe, thank you. I feel that we've only just started to have the juicy debate.
It's just only begun.
To
the
be
discussion must
continued.
continue. It's
Yes.
a long journey that
Indeed.
we're on here, and we're prepared to go on that journey to solve Africa's problems.
All right, Lindiwe, Sibe, Chika, thank you for your time. This is such an important discussion to have on the stream and around the African continent and in South Africa, of course. Malika.
It is a long journey. This is El Heri on Twitter, who says government officials need to have the political will to secure lives no matter the nationality, as life is sacred. I'll end it there. Thanks to our stream community for pitching this show.
All right. Thank you, guests. Appreciate your time. Malika and I will always see you online at AJ Stream on Twitter. Take care.